Hello everyone, my name is Daniel, and I want to share a piece of my heart with you. This is not just a story, it's my life. I was brought to a new country with promises of a brighter future for me and my 10-year-old daughter, Emily. But soon, those promises turned into chains.
The help that brought us here was weaponized against us, thrown back in my face during every argument. We were abandoned, left to fend for ourselves in a place where we had no family, no support, and no way to go back. Words became weapons, cutting deeper than anything physical. Emily, my sweet little girl, was isolated, her joy dimmed by the weight of things no child should have to endure. We endured nights of cold, sleeping in our car, with only each other for warmth. There were moments I thought I couldn't go on, but every time I looked at her, I found a reason to keep fighting. That's why I started this channel. Emily gave me the idea. Her innocence and hope lit a spark in me when I had nothing left. This channel is a way for us to survive, to rebuild, and to share stories of love, resilience, and hope with the world.
Our journey has been filled with unimaginable pain, but also the unbreakable bond between a father and his daughter. If our story touches your heart, I humbly ask for your support. Watch our videos, share them, and help us create something beautiful out of the ashes. To everyone who's listening, thank you. Your kindness means more than you'll ever know. At this moment, we have submitted a visa application to immigration on humanitarian grounds, as we have no one left in our home country. No family, no support, no place to return to. We are entirely alone. If forced to go back, my daughter and I would have nowhere to go but the streets. Our only hope now lies in the possibility of a positive outcome from immigration, so we can hold on to some semblance of stability and continue building a future together. Without further ado, let's dive into the heartfelt story of a father and daughter's relentless struggle, their unimaginable suffering, and their courageous journey towards survival and hope.
Daniel was a man who had it all. A fulfilling job, a thriving business, a beautiful house, and most importantly, a deep, unshakable bond with his 10-year-old daughter, Emily. After Emily's mother left them years ago, Daniel had vowed to give her a life filled with love and security. And for a time, he succeeded. Their home was warm and inviting, their days were filled with laughter, and their future seemed promising. The house they lived in was a symbol of their shared dreams. It had wide windows that let in golden sunlight, a cozy living room where Daniel and Emily often curled up to watch movies, and a backyard where Emily's laughter echoed as she played on her swing set. Daniel had worked tirelessly to create this sanctuary, a space where Emily could feel safe and loved despite the absence of her mother. Daniel's daily routine revolved around providing the best for Emily. As a manager in a reputable firm, he spent his hours well at the office, ensuring every detail of his work was perfect. On the side, he ran a small but flourishing business that gave him a sense of pride and accomplishment. Though his days were busy, he always made time for Emily. Whether it was helping her with homework, attending her school events, or simply sitting with her during dinner to listen to her chatter about her day, Daniel's priority was clear. Emily came first. Emily, in turn, adored her father. She would wake up early just to make him little drawings to tuck into his wallet. "For luck, Dad," she'd say, beaming. Her notes often read, "You're the best dad in the world," or "Thank you for being my hero." Daniel kept every single one, tucked away in a small box. They were his treasures, reminders of why he worked so hard. Their weekends were sacred. Daniel would take Emily out for food treats at their favorite diner, followed by trips to the park. Emily loved to sketch while Daniel read, their quiet companionship speaking volumes about the bond they shared. On rainy days, they'd cook new recipes together, their laughter filling the kitchen. At night, Daniel would tuck Emily into bed, always with a story.
Dad, you're my favorite person in the whole wide world.
And you're mine, Emily, always. But life, as unpredictable as it is, has a way of testing even the strongest bonds. Unbeknownst to Daniel, storm clouds were gathering on the horizon. While he focused on building a bright future for Emily, the world outside their sanctuary was changing in ways that would soon upend everything they had built together. The challenges ahead would demand every ounce of strength and resilience they had, but the love they shared would become their guiding light through the darkest of times.
In his late 30s, Daniel met Sophia, a beautiful woman in her early 30s who worked at the same office. She was charming, intelligent, and full of warmth. At first, their connection was professional. Brief chats over coffee, shared laughs during meetings, but over time, their interactions deepened. Sophia's sharp wit and infectious laughter drew Daniel in, and he found himself looking forward to their conversations. One afternoon, as they worked late in the office, Sophia glanced over at Daniel with a warm smile.
You're a great dad. It's obvious how much you care about her.
Emily is my world. Everything I do is for her.
It's rare to see that kind of dedication. She's lucky to have you.
As the weeks turned into months, their friendship blossomed into something deeper. Daniel found himself opening up to Sophia in ways he hadn't with anyone else since Emily's mother left. When Sophia met Emily for the first time, Daniel was nervous. He watched as Sophia knelt down to Emily's level, her eyes sparkling with warmth.
Hi, Emily. Your dad talks about you all the time. I've been dying to meet the artist behind all those amazing drawings.
Do you want to see my sketchbook?
I'd love to.
That evening, as they went out together for dinner, Daniel felt a flicker of hope. Emily was laughing, her usual reserved nature replaced by an easy comfort around Sophia. It was a sight that warmed his heart. One evening, after a particularly fun outing at the park, Emily turned to Daniel as they walked home. The sunset painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, and Emily's small hand slipped into his.
Dad, I like her. She's really nice.
I'm glad, sweetheart. She's special.
Dad, I like her. She's really nice.
I'm glad, sweetheart. She's special. As their relationship deepened, Sophia seemed to embrace her role in their lives. She joined Daniel and Emily on many things. For Daniel, it felt like a dream come true. Not only had he found love, but he had also found someone who loved his daughter. Sophia's kindness extended beyond her actions. She took time to understand Emily, asking about her favorite books and hobbies, and encouraged her artistic talents. When Emily proudly showed her a new drawing, Sophia would praise her enthusiastically, fueling the little girl's confidence.
The year 2020 brought an unexpected storm. The COVID-19 pandemic. Daniel's stable life began to crumble. His company, which he had faithfully served for years, announced mass layoffs in response to the economic downturn. The day he received the dreaded email, his heart sank. His name was on the list. It felt like the ground beneath him had vanished. Losing his job was more than a financial blow. It was an attack on the stability he had painstakingly built for Emily. He spent that evening sitting on the edge of his bed, the termination notice in one hand and Emily's latest drawing in the other. The blows kept coming. Shortly after losing his job, Daniel's small business, a side project that had been his safety net, began to falter. Lockdowns meant no customers, and the bills quickly piled up. Within months, the weight of unpaid loans and mortgage payments forced him to shut the business down. The final blow came when the bank repossessed their home. Daniel watched helplessly as movers carried out their belongings. Emily stood in the driveway clutching her sketchbook, her wide eyes filled with confusion.
Dad, why are they taking our stuff?
It's just a small change, sweetheart. We're going to a new adventure, okay? And we'll still be together. That's all that matters.
Emily nodded, though her expression remained uncertain. That night, as they settled into the small room they'd rented, Daniel tucked her into the unfamiliar bed. She held her stuffed bunny tightly.
Are we going to get our house back?
We're going to make a new home. It'll be even better. You'll see.
But the truth was, he had no idea how they would move forward. His sleepless nights were filled with relentless questions. How would he provide for Emily? How could he give her the stability she deserved? Each day felt heavier than the last, and the weight of his failures bore down on him. Emily, sensing her father's struggles, began spending more time with him. She would sit beside him as he sifted through job applications, her small hand resting on his arm. Sometimes she drew pictures of their old house or scenes of happier times. One evening, she handed him a drawing of their family.
Dad, we still have each other. That's what matters, right?
You're right, Emily. We'll get through this, together.
As weeks turned into months, Daniel's hope began to dwindle. Then one evening, Sophia proposed a lifeline. Daniel, she began hesitantly, why don't we move to my country? Things are more stable there and we can start fresh. I'll go first. Get settled, and then you and Emily can join me." Daniel hesitated. Uprooting their lives felt daunting, but he had run out of options. Desperate for a solution, Daniel agreed. He explained the plan to Emily, framing it as an exciting adventure. "We're going on a big trip," he told her with a smile, though his heart was heavy. "We're going to start something new." A few months later, Daniel and Emily packed their few remaining belongings and boarded a plane, their hearts filled with equal parts hope and trepidation. As the aircraft soared into the sky, Daniel glanced at Emily, who was staring out the window with wide eyes. He reached over and squeezed her hand.
We've got this.
The journey ahead would be far from easy, but Daniel clung to the belief that brighter days awaited them. The promise of a fresh start brought Daniel and Emily to Sophia's country with hope in their hearts. At first, everything seemed to be falling into place. Sophia's family welcomed them warmly, offering them a place to stay in their modest but comfortable home. Though the space was tight, Daniel was grateful for the support. Emily shared a room with Sophia's niece and nephew, a 12-year-old girl and a 10-year-old boy. She adjusted quickly, as children often do, bringing her sketchbook and crayons into this new chapter of their lives. Daniel began working at a local fuel station to make ends meet. It wasn't the managerial position he was used to, but it was an honest job, and it gave him a sense of purpose. Every night, as he returned home, exhausted but hopeful, he would check on Emily, often finding her doodling quietly in her shared room or chatting with the other kids. But the warmth that Sophia had shown Emily at the start began to fade. It was subtle at first. Sophia grew less patient, snapping at Emily for small mistakes. Once, when Emily accidentally spilled a cup of water at the dinner table, Sophia's sharp words cut through the air.
Can't you be more careful?
Within weeks, the situation escalated. Emily was asked to leave the shared room with the kids and sleep on a small mattress on the floor of Daniel and Sophia's room. The explanation was vague. The kids need their own space, but it didn't sit well with Daniel. That night, as he tucked Emily into the mattress, her eyes brimmed with confusion.
Dad, why can't I stay in the room with them?
I don't know, sweetheart, but it's just for now. I'll make it better, I promise.
But things only worsened. As the days turned into weeks, the subtle isolation that Emily faced grew more pronounced. Sophia's initial warmth had long faded, replaced by sharp words and cold indifference. Sophia no longer encouraged Emily to join the family's activities in the living room. Instead, she would send Emily to the bedroom with an iPad, instructing her to stay there quietly in the dark, while the rest of the family gathered to watch TV or play board games. One evening, Daniel came home from a long shift at the fuel station. His feet ached, and exhaustion weighed heavily on his shoulders, but he still managed to smile as he stepped through the door. The sound of laughter and chatter from the living room greeted him, but Emily was nowhere to be seen. Curious, he made his way to the bedroom and found her sitting cross-legged on the floor in the dark, her face illuminated by the iPad's glow. She was scrolling through cartoons, but her expression was somber, her shoulders hunched as though she were trying to make herself invisible.
Emily, why are you sitting here alone?
Mom told me to stay here.
You don't have to stay in here, sweetheart. Come with me.
She said I'd be in the way if I went out there.
Anger flared within Daniel, but he forced himself to stay calm. He wrapped his arms around Emily and kissed the top of her head. "You're never in the way. Don't ever think that." That night, Daniel confronted Sophia.
Why are you keeping Emily away from everyone? She's a child. She shouldn't feel like she's not part of the family.
She needs to learn to respect boundaries, Daniel. The other kids need their space, and frankly, Emily is different. She doesn't fit in with them.
She's not different. She's a kind, loving child who deserves to feel welcomed.
Oh, come on. She's your child, not mine. Don't expect me to cater to her every whim.
The words hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. He realized then how deep the divide had grown. The tension escalated further when an old coffee table in the garage broke during playtime. Emily had been playing with Sophia's niece and nephew when the table's legs snapped, sending the wooden surface crashing to the floor. Sophia stormed into the garage, her face a mask of anger.
What happened here?
Before Emily could respond, Sophia's niece spoke up. "We were all playing, and the table just fell." But Sophia's glare remained fixed on Emily.
This is your fault, isn't it? You are always clumsy.
I didn't do it. It just broke.
Daniel, hearing the commotion, rushed into the garage.
What's happened here?
Ask your daughter. She's careless and irresponsible.
They're kids, Sophia. It was an old table, and accidents happen.
You and your daughter are here in this country because of me, don't you? Forget that.
Now where did that come from?
Just shut up. Do Don't you dare talk back to me. I saved you from your country, do you remember? You should be underneath my feet. If it wasn't for me, you would be begging on the streets. So, you and your daughter listen to what I say. Got it?
Daniel's jaw tightened. For the first time, he felt the weight of their dependency being weaponized against him. Sophia's sister, who had been listening from the doorway, chimed in. "Maybe it's time you found your own place," she said coldly. Emily stood silently, tears streaming down her cheeks as she clutched her sketchbook to her chest. Daniel looked at her, his heart breaking into pieces. That night, as Emily lay curled up on her small mattress, Daniel sat beside her, stroking her hair as she cried herself to sleep.
We'll leave soon, sweetheart. I promise. I'll find us a better place.
But even as he spoke the words, he wondered how much longer they could endure. The weight of their situation felt unbearable. Yet he knew he had to stay strong, for Emily's sake, if not his own.
When Sophia's family suggested that Daniel and Emily should leave, the reality of their situation came crashing down. With no place to go and no immediate options, Daniel loaded their few remaining belongings into his car. Despite the hopelessness of the moment, there was one glimmer of light. Daniel had already secured a new job as a manager at a restaurant in another city, along with accommodation to share a room with a kind family. However, the agreed move-in date with the new family was 2 days away. Those 2 days stretched out like an eternity, leaving Daniel and Emily with no choice but to sleep in the car during one of the harshest winters they had ever experienced, as they never knew what winter was from the country they had come from.
The biting winter air seeped into every crack of the car, and the night loomed heavy as Daniel parked in an empty lot. It was the only refuge they had. The car, old and poorly insulated, offered little protection from the freezing temperatures. Daniel sat in the driver's seat, draping his jacket over Emily, who was curled up in the back seat with her stuffed bunny. Her small frame trembled as she tried to fall asleep.
Dad, I'm so cold.
Daniel's heart shattered. He quickly turned around, reaching for her tiny hands and rubbing them between his palms to generate warmth.
I know, sweetheart. I'm sorry. I'll fix this. Just hold on a little longer.
He grabbed the last blanket they had and tucked it tightly around her. Then, he slid into the back seat, wrapping himself around her like a cocoon. Emily's face was pressed against his chest, and he could feel her shivers. He held her closer, shielding her from the worst of the cold, even as his own body shook violently. His teeth chattered and his fingers turned numb, but all he could think about was keeping her safe. The hours dragged on. Daniel's thoughts raced as he stared out at the empty lot, his breath visible in the frigid air. Memories of their warm home, Emily's laughter, and the life they had lost played in his mind like a cruel taunt. Tears welled up in his eyes, but he blinked them away. He couldn't let Emily see him break. The second night was no easier. The temperature seemed even colder, and the frost on the car windows thickened, blocking out the little light from the street lamps. Daniel tried to keep Emily entertained during the day by telling her stories and drawing pictures with her crayons, but as night fell again, the reality of their plight weighed heavier. As they settled into the car for the second night, Emily clung to her stuffed bunny and tried to be brave. "It's like camping, right, Dad?" she said with a weak smile. Daniel forced a chuckle, though his heart ached. "That's right, my little star. Just like camping. And tomorrow we'll have a warm bed waiting for us." Next morning, Daniel started the car and drove off to meet the kind family who had offered them temporary shelter. As he drove, he gripped the steering wheel tightly, his resolve stronger than ever. He wouldn't let Emily endure another night like that. No matter what it took, he would rebuild their lives, one step at a time.
After 2 grueling nights in the car, Daniel and Emily finally arrived at their new accommodation. A small room they were to share in a modest but welcoming home owned by a kind family. Though the space was limited, it felt like a palace compared to the freezing confines of the car.
When they stepped inside, Emily's eyes lit up. She placed her stuffed bunny on the bed and turned to her father.
It's cozy. I like it.
It's not much, but it's ours for now, Emily. We're safe now.
A few days after settling in, Daniel began his new job as a manager of a local restaurant. Life began to regain a semblance of stability. Daniel's job provided enough to cover their needs. Though challenges still lay ahead, Daniel felt confident they had found their footing. 3 months into his new role, Daniel's hard work was recognized. His company offered him a promotion to oversee a larger establishment in a nearby town. The new position promised better pay, and he viewed this as a step toward securing a better future for Emily. On the other end, Sophia waited to reunite once Daniel moved somewhere closer to where her family lived. Shortly after the move, Sophia moved in. Though their relationship had been strained by the distance, a part of Daniel still hoped they could rebuild the life they had once envisioned together. Sophia's return seemed to offer the possibility of a complete family unit once again. When Sophia arrived, Daniel greeted her with cautious optimism. Emily, though greeted Sophia politely, she stayed close to her father, as if unsure of where she stood in this new dynamic. For a while, things seemed to stabilize. Sophia continued with her studies while Daniel continued to shoulder the financial burden, paying for rent, utilities, groceries, and any other expenses. It wasn't easy, but Daniel was willing to take on the responsibility for the sake of their family. He relished the moments when they could sit down together for dinner, laughing over Emily's stories or sharing updates about their day. Daniel thought they were finally finding their footing as a family. For him, the sacrifices felt worth it, as long as Emily felt secure and loved.
Despite the outward appearances of harmony, cracks began to show. Sophia's behavior toward Emily didn't reflect the fresh start Daniel had hoped for. The warmth and kindness she had once shown were replaced by sharp words and unreasonable demands. Small incidents became the source of significant tension. One evening, Emily left a few pieces of paper on the living room floor after finishing an art project. Sophia noticed and called her out.
Why can't you clean up after? The whole house isn't your playroom.
Emily quickly bent down to gather the scraps, her face flushed with embarrassment. Daniel intervened. Emily, you need to always ensure that your room is kept clean after playing, honey. Back into their room, Daniel spoke to Sophia.
It's just some paper, Sophia. She's a child. She will eventually learn, and I will keep talking to her as well.
This is the problem, Daniel. You let her do whatever she wants. She needs to learn responsibility now and not in 6 months or a year or 10 years.
These arguments became a regular occurrence. Sophia seemed to view Emily as an inconvenience rather than a member of the family. She complained about small messes, the way Emily left the sofa cushions out of place, or how she spent too much time on her art. Sophia also began questioning every penny Daniel spent on Emily, no matter how minor. Emily, sensing the tension, grew quieter. She spent most of her time in her room, drawing or reading. Daniel noticed the change and tried to compensate by spending as much time with her as possible. But the strain in the household was palpable, and the walls of their home, once filled with laughter, now seemed heavy with unspoken tension.
Sophia's parents had long planned to visit their children, and their arrival was met with much preparation. When Sophia's parents finally arrived, they were warm and polite to Daniel. Emily, shy and reserved, stayed close to her father, unsure of how to approach her new grandparents. The first few days were filled with meals, conversations, and plans to explore nearby attractions. He hoped this visit would bring a sense of normalcy and unity. Sophia's parents suggested a day trip to a nearby city to explore its cultural landmarks and enjoy some time away from the usual routine. Everyone agreed. On the morning of the trip, Daniel received a call from his manager. A last-minute issue had arisen at the restaurant, and his presence was urgently requested for a meeting in the same city they were planning to visit. Knowing it was an important matter, Daniel explained the situation to Sophia, who agreed. He made sure Emily was comfortable and reassured her that he'd meet them after his meeting. Daniel arrived at the meeting point at 3 p.m., exact time the meeting was scheduled for. But the manager seemed late, and while waiting, he sat in the car scrolling through his phone to pass the time. The manager finally arrived at 4 p.m., and Daniel, in the haste, left his phone in car.
It wasn't until 5 p.m. that Daniel realized how late it was and that he had forgotten his phone in the car. Panic surged through him as he excused himself from the meeting and rushed back to the car. Grabbing his phone from the passenger seat, he saw a flood of missed calls and text messages from Sophia. Many of the messages were angry and accusatory, with harsh words that made his heart sink. "You're so irresponsible," one text read. "Good for nothing. Why can't you manage a simple task? Get lost to your own country if you can't handle this." Feeling a mix of guilt and frustration, Daniel called Sophia immediately to explain.
I'm so sorry. The meeting started late, and I had mistakenly left my phone in the car. I'm on my way now.
But Sophia was in no mood to listen. She unleashed her anger, yelling at him over the phone. Daniel tried to stay calm, apologizing repeatedly and explaining the situation. But the shouting didn't stop. By the time he reached the meeting point, Sophia and her parents were visibly upset.
As Daniel parked the car and approached them, Sophia launched into a tirade, not even allowing him to speak. Sophia said, "If you were in a meeting, we'll confirm it." Upon reaching the meeting place, before Daniel could say anything, Sophia stormed off toward the restaurant. Embarrassed and powerless, Daniel followed, pleading with her to calm down. When they reached the restaurant, Sophia barged into the meeting room, where Daniel's colleagues and manager were still gathered. Her loud accusations drew shocked stares from everyone present.
Was he really in a meeting, or is he just lying to cover for himself?
The room fell silent. Daniel's manager, taken aback, confirmed that Daniel had indeed been in the meeting and that it started late. Even with this confirmation, Sophia refused to back down.
You should have checked the time. You're so unreliable.
The car ride back to their hometown was tense and filled with harsh words. Sophia continued to berate Daniel, accusing him of being irresponsible and ungrateful. Her parents chimed in occasionally, expressing their disappointment in him. Emily, seated quietly in the back seat, clutched her stuffed bunny tightly, her eyes brimming with tears as she watched her father endure the verbal assault. Daniel stayed silent for most of the drive, knowing that anything he said would only escalate the situation. When they finally reached home, Daniel excused himself, retreating to the bathroom to take a long shower. He stayed in the room afterward, hoping to avoid further conflict. But Sophia was relentless. She stormed into the room and demanded that he sit in the living room so her parents could talk to him. Daniel, exhausted and defeated, complied. As Sophia and her parents reiterated their grievances, she added,
You're only here because of me. Don't forget that. If you can't listen to me, maybe you should just go back to your country.
Daniel didn't respond. He simply nodded, knowing that any argument would fall on deaf ears. But inside, he felt a mix of anger and heartbreak. He looked over at Emily, who stood in the doorway, her small figure trembling as she tried to process what was happening. The confrontation had left him shaken, but it also solidified his resolve. He knew he needed to protect Emily and find a way to rebuild their lives, away from the constant turmoil.
The following day, Sophia and her parents departed for a weekend trip to Sophia's elder sister's home. Emily stayed behind with Daniel, who had to work over the weekend. During the visit, Sophia's frustrations with her marriage came to the forefront. Secretly, however, her thoughts had already been shifting. Over the past months, Sophia had started to feel that Daniel was no longer the man she had fallen in love with. When they first met, he had been successful. A manager, a business owner, a man who exuded ambition and drive. But now, he was just an ordinary worker struggling to make ends meet. For Sophia, this reality clashed with her lifelong dream of having a partner who was professional, successful, and someone who could provide the lifestyle she envisioned. Sophia kept these thoughts to herself, not wanting to reveal them to her family. Instead, she began using their frequent arguments as a strategy. Each disagreement became another piece of ammunition in her plan to justify breaking the marriage. Whether it was over Emily, household responsibilities, or Daniel's inability to meet her expectations, Sophia magnified every issue, planting seeds of discord while portraying herself as the one who had sacrificed the most. By the end of the weekend, Sophia had made her decision. With her family's support, she resolved to leave Daniel for good. On Monday morning, Daniel was immersed in his duties at the restaurant when he received a call from Sophia's brother-in-law saying they were on their way to see him, and they will need the key to the house. Before Daniel could respond, the line went dead. Minutes later, Sophia, her parents, her elder sister, and her brother-in-law arrived at the restaurant. They waited outside, their expressions a mix of determination and indifference. They told Daniel that Sophia had decided to leave him. Daniel's breath caught in his throat.
What do you mean, move on? Can we talk about this?
There's nothing to talk about. I've made my decision. We need the key to the house so I can pack my things. And if you don't oblige, I'll get the police to deal with you.
At least let me be there when you pack. I deserve that much.
No, I don't want you there.
Daniel looked at her family, hoping for some support, but their faces were unreadable. Realizing he had no choice, he reached into his pocket and handed over the key.
When Daniel returned home after his shift, the house was eerily silent. He stepped inside and was immediately struck by the emptiness. The living room, once filled with warmth and shared moments, was now barren. Sophia had taken nearly everything. Her clothes, blankets, pillows, kitchen utensils, dishes, and even small decorative items. Daniel walked through the house in disbelief. Emily's room was untouched, but the emptiness of the rest of the house filled him with a deep sense of loss. He immediately tried calling Sophia, but his calls went unanswered. Text after text went unread. The finality of her actions hit him like a tidal wave. When Emily returned from school later that day, she noticed the stark changes immediately.
Dad, where did everything go?
Mom decided to leave, honey. But don't worry, sweetheart. We'll figure this out. I promise.
Emily nodded slowly, but her wide eyes betrayed her confusion and fear. That night, father and daughter sat on the floor, sharing a simple meal. Daniel held Emily close, his resolve hardening. No matter how daunting the road ahead, he vowed to rebuild their lives and ensure Emily felt safe and loved once more.
A few days after Sophia left, Daniel was still grappling with the emptiness of the house and the emotional toll of the separation, when Sophia called and said they will be coming the next day to take the fridge, the chest freezer, and the car. The car was from a $5,000 loan from one of Sophia's family members with the view to pay back once Daniel was stable in his life, while the face and the chest freezer was given as a gift by the family for the new house they all moved into. Daniel froze, gripping the phone tightly.
You're taking the car too? How am I supposed to get to work? To take Emily to school?
That's your problem, not mine. I just need our things back. Be there when we arrive.
The call ended abruptly, leaving Daniel staring at the phone in disbelief. The car, the fridge, the freezer, items he relied on to maintain some semblance of stability, were about to be taken as well.
The next afternoon, Sophia's parents and her brother-in-law arrived with a tow. Daniel opened the door, his face pale with despair, but he said nothing. Emily watched from the corner of the room. Sophia's father walked in without acknowledging Daniel. As they hauled the appliances out, Daniel stood silently, watching helplessly. He didn't have the money to replace them, and he knew the food inside would go bad within hours. The sight of the dining table piled high with the contents of the freezer, a mix of meats, frozen vegetables, and pre-cooked meals, made his chest tighten. He had no way to store them, no means to prevent them from going to waste. Finally, they turned to the car. It had been Daniel's lifeline. The one thing allowing him to work and keep their lives afloat was taken away.
Daniel wanted to plead, but he knew it was futile. As the car was driven away, Emily clung to his side, her small hand gripping his tightly.
Dad, why are they taking everything?
Those were their things, honey, so they have taken it back. But we'll figure something out, I promise.
Over the next few days, the food left on the dining table was all wasted. Without a freezer or fridge, Daniel couldn't save it, and each discarded item felt like another blow to his dignity. His paycheck, already stretched thin by rent and bills, left him with no room to replace what had been taken.
Adding to his burden was the precariousness of his visa situation. With his work visa tied with Sophia, Daniel knew he was on borrowed time. His visa expired shortly after, leaving him unable to legally work. A temporary visa was granted to allow Emily to complete her studies, but it didn't permit Daniel to earn an income. Bills began piling up, and with no way to pay rent, the landlord gave them notice.
On the last day in their flat, they packed their remaining belongings into the car Daniel bought for $2,000 from the final paycheck he received from work and drove aimlessly, searching for a place to stay. That night, they parked in a quiet lot and slept in the car again. Daniel draped his jacket over Emily and held her close. She fell asleep in his arms, her trust in him unwavering despite the dire circumstances. But as the hours dragged on, Daniel stared out the frosted window, despair gnawing at him. Thoughts of failure and hopelessness filled his mind.
The next morning, Daniel reached out to a family he had met through the community. They had offered help once before, and now, with no other options, he swallowed his pride and called them. Hearing the desperation in his voice, they invited Daniel and Emily to stay with them temporarily. The family's kindness was a balm to Daniel's battered spirit. Though the accommodations were modest, a small shared room with little privacy, it was a safe haven. Daniel poured his energy into finding a way forward, researching visa options and community programs that might offer support. Despite everything, Sophia refused to reconcile. Every attempt Daniel made to reach out was met with cold indifference or outright hostility from her and her family. Yet Daniel persisted, driven by his love for Emily and his determination to give her a better future.
Though their journey was fraught with uncertainty, Daniel vowed that he would never give up. Together, he and Emily would face whatever challenges lay ahead, bound by their unshakable love and resilience.
One evening, as Daniel sat on the worn-out couch in their shared room, he let out a deep sigh. Emily, sitting cross-legged on the floor with her sketchbook, looked up at him with concern in her bright, curious eyes. Sensing his heaviness, she climbed onto the couch beside him, her small hand resting on his arm.
Dad, are you okay?
Emily, I've been thinking a lot. Things have been so hard for us lately. Losing everything, not being able to work, and seeing you go without it's tearing me apart. I'm trying my best, but it feels like nothing is enough.
You're doing everything you can, Dad. I know that.
Daniel's heart swelled with both pride and sorrow. He wanted to shield her from these hardships, yet here she was, his 10-year-old daughter, offering him comfort. All of a sudden, Emily's face lit up with a spark of an idea.
Dad, why don't you start a YouTube channel? You can create story videos which could help us earn money and be the start of something new.
A YouTube channel? Emily, where did you come up with that?
I watch YouTube sometimes, and I see how people make videos. You're so good at making me laugh and teaching me things. I think others would love it too.
Daniel stared at her, his heart swelling with a mix of astonishment and hope. He pulled her into a tight hug, his emotions overwhelming him. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered, while Emily hugged him back.
I feel like the words from your mouth came straight from God. Emily, you're incredible.
We can do it together, Dad. You can do the videos, and I can help with ideas. We can make it fun.
I'll do it. I'll work hard to create something special. We'll make this work, Emily. I promise.
That night, they knelt together on the floor, their hands clasped in prayer. Daniel's voice wavered as he spoke.
God, thank you for giving Emily this idea. Please guide me as I take this step and help me provide for my daughter.
The next morning, Daniel woke up with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in months. He and Emily sat in their small sitting room and brainstormed ideas for the channel.
What do you think the audience would love to see?
Stories. I think you should start from our story, Dad. I know you have been going through a lot. Why don't you share your story with everyone and ask for their support for our channel before you start making other story videos? I know everyone who hears our story will definitely want to help out.
Emily, you are brilliant.
That evening, their first video started to take shape, and they worked tirelessly over the week to complete it. The story of themselves and their struggles for survival. They worked together to edit and uploaded the video, which you are currently watching. As they watched the video go live, Emily grinned up at her father.
We did it, Dad.
We did, sweetheart.
As Daniel and Emily's story reaches another painful chapter, their shelter is no longer theirs. Unable to contribute to rent or bills due to Daniel's inability to work without a visa, they faced relentless taunts until they had no choice but to leave. Once again, their car has become their home. Parked outside a supermarket, they use free Wi-Fi as their only resource. Daniel and Emily pour their hearts into creating YouTube videos. Their videos are more than just stories. They are a father's plea for understanding, a daughter's light shining through unimaginable darkness. They are fighting not just to survive, but to hold on to the hope of a better tomorrow. Their journey is heartbreaking, but it's also a reminder that love can withstand even the harshest storms. And while their car may be their home for now, their dreams are still very much alive, waiting for the day they can find peace and stability.
Daniel and Emily now navigate each day with quiet resilience, relying on dry food to sustain themselves. Public restrooms and showers have become their lifelines, a stark reminder of the life they once had. Yet through it all, they hold on to hope, fragile but unyielding, that their humanitarian visa appeal will bring them the stability and dignity they so desperately need.